The first time I met Rowena Zellers, she was standing in my driveway like she owned it, clipboard in hand, oversized sunglasses, and a mouth that couldn't stop moving. "You can't have that trailer parked here," she barked, pointing at the 20-foot fishing trailer I'd just backed in. "This is a deed-restricted community under the Glenridge HOA, and that violates Section 14.3.2. I wiped the sweat off my forehead. "Lady, I'm not in your HOA." Her lips curled like I'd insulted her ancestors. "You live on the same street, that includes you." I leaned against the trailer hitch. "I bought this property 3 years ago. It was specifically listed as not part of an HOA, I made sure of that." "I don't care what your real estate agent told you, Kyle," she said, reading my name off the mailbox like it was a summons. "You're in Glenridge now." "Whether you like it or not," I laughed. "Nope, I'm not. And unless you've got some legal document that says otherwise, we're done here." She stormed off, heels clicking down the sidewalk like a metronome of rage. 2 days later, I got a letter. "Notice of violation, unauthorized trailer storage." Signed, of course, by Rowena Zellers, acting president of the Glenridge HOA. I tossed it in the trash. Then came the second letter. Then the third. Then a fine $500. I ignored all of them. Next thing I knew, a guy in khakis showed up claiming to be the HOA's compliance officer, talking about liens and legal action. I told him to get off my property before I called the sheriff. A week after that, I got served. Rowena Zellers had filed a lawsuit against me in small claims court, alleging I was willfully violating HOA regulations and owed over $3,000 in cumulative fines. She even claimed I'd signed a contract when I moved in. I was furious, but also weirdly excited. I'd been waiting for this. See, what Rowena didn't know was that I used to work in zoning enforcement for 2 different counties. I'd seen HOAs try this kind of stunt before expanding their power like mold in a damp basement. I showed up to court with a folder 2 inches thick. Property records. Plat maps. Original subdivision covenants. Even a notarized letter from the developer stating my lot was never included in the HOA boundaries. Rowena was already there, sitting at the plaintiff's table, flipping through her binder like she was preparing for a Supreme Court case. The judge came in, glanced at both of us, and asked Rowena to state her case first. She stood up like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama. "Your Honor, Mr. Kyle Jensen has persistently violated the Glenridge HOA's established bylaws despite multiple notices. He resides within the geographical bounds of our community and is therefore subject to its rules." She handed up her stack of papers. The judge leafed through them, his brow furrowing. "Do you have a signed contract from Mr. Jensen agreeing to join this HOA?" Rowena blinked. "Well, no." "But he lives on Alder Ridge Drive. That street is clearly within the Glenridge community." I raised my hand. "Yes, Mr. Jensen," the judge said. "I have with me the original plat map from the county recorder's office." I handed it over. "You'll see my property lot 39 was never included in the Glenridge HOA formation. It was carved out before the HOA was established. I also have the developer's letter confirming that." The judge took his time, read everything, compared maps, looked at Rowena. "You dragged this man to court over a fabricated membership." Rowena's face flushed. "He should be in the HOA. It's not fair to the rest of us if he just—" The judge cut her off. "That's not how the law works, ma'am." He turned back to me. "Mr. Jensen, you're correct. Your property is not part of this HOA. And frankly, I'm concerned this organization is attempting to enforce authority where it has none." Rowena opened her mouth again, but the judge raised a hand. "I'm referring this case to the county attorney's office for further review. If your HOA is unlawfully collecting dues or issuing fines outside its jurisdiction, that's a serious matter." He banged the gavel. "Case dismissed." Rowena looked like someone had just unplugged her. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The Monday after court, I was halfway through patching a drywall seam in the garage when a city code inspector knocked on my door. He introduced himself as Dale and explained that someone had submitted a complaint that I was modifying a structure without a permit. He looked apologetic, like he already knew it was nonsense. I showed him the interior, the untouched roofline, and the completely permitted trailer pad I'd poured a year ago. Dale glanced over his checklist, took a single photo, and muttered, "I'm gonna close this out. Sorry to bother you." As he left, I asked who filed the complaint. He gave me a look. "Can't say officially, but it came in with Glenridge HOA letterhead." I watched him drive off and stood in the driveway for a while, arms crossed. I wasn't surprised, just annoyed. Rowena had lost in court, but she wasn't used to losing. People like her didn't stop, they escalated. 3 days later, I woke up to find my trailer covered in bright orange stickers that read "Impound Notice." A tow truck idled at the curb, the driver tapping a tablet. I walked out in boots and a flannel, calm but ready. "You got the wrong house, pal," I said. He looked up. "You Kyle Jensen?" "Yeah. HOA called this in, said the vehicle's unauthorized and needs removal." "This vehicle's registered, insured, and on private property. You tow it, that's theft." He hesitated. "They said it was communal property." I pointed at the survey stakes that had been there since I moved in. "You see that? That's my boundary marker. You so much as hook a chain to that hitch, and I won't be calling the HOA, I'll be calling the sheriff." He backed off and drove away without a word. That night, I installed 4 more security cameras and ran the feed directly to a drive I kept off-site. I also filed a report with the sheriff's department for attempted vehicle theft, attaching the footage. 2 days later, a neighbor named Elise knocked on my door. I'd seen her around, single mom, worked long shifts at the hospital. "Hey," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "Can I talk to you for a sec?" "Sure, everything okay?" She stepped inside and lowered her voice. "I overheard something at the HOA meeting last night. Rowena's been trying to redraw the neighborhood boundaries. Like, officially, she wants to annex the properties on this side of the street. Yours included." "She can't do that," I said. "There are legal steps, public notice, unanimous consent. The county has to approve it." She's pushing for what she called a retroactive inclusion clause, said she knew someone in the zoning office who could make paperwork disappear. That caught my attention. "Did she name anyone?" "Just said he owed her a favor. I don't know what kind of favor that is, but it sounded shady." I thanked her and offered to walk her back. She shook her head and left quickly, like she didn't want to be seen. That weekend, I drove down to the county recorder's office. I requested any recent filings by the Glenridge HOA. The clerk, a guy named Marcus, typed for a while, then looked up. "Actually, yeah, they submitted an amended charter last Friday, includes 3 new parcels. Yours is one." "Who signed off on it?" He checked the screen. "Looks like the zoning supervisor, a guy named Doyle." I felt my jaw tighten. Doyle and I had worked the same beat 12 years ago. He was the kind of guy who used his badge to get out of parking tickets and liked to bend rules if he thought nobody was watching. Not corrupt in the dramatic Hollywood sense, but slippery. Opportunistic. I asked Marcus for a copy of the filing, paid the fee, and drove straight to the county commissioner's office. I knew Commissioner Vargas from a town hall project we'd both worked on back when I was still in enforcement. She remembered me. "Got something ugly you might want to see," I told her, handing over the filing. She scanned the document. "Is this a joke? These parcels aren't even contiguous with the Glenridge tract." "Exactly, and the signatures are forged." "That's not my handwriting, and the other 2 lots listed. One of them's owned by a retired couple in Florida who haven't been here in over a year." She pursed her lips. "And this got processed last Friday by Doyle." She stood up. "I'll handle it. And you might want to talk to the sheriff." By Tuesday, an investigation had been opened. The county clerk's office froze all pending HOA filings. The sheriff's department sent 2 investigators to my house to take a statement. I handed them the security footage, the impound attempt, and the forged annexation paperwork. One of the deputies, a broad-shouldered guy named Harlan, nodded slowly as he flipped through the evidence. "This isn't just a civil matter anymore. This is fraud, misuse of public resources, and possibly conspiracy to commit extortion. I gave him Rowena's full name and the address listed on her HOA registration. We know it, he said. You're not the only one who's filed complaints. That night, I watched from my porch as two unmarked cruisers pulled up to Rowena's house. They were inside for nearly an hour. When they left, she stood in the doorway, arms folded, face pale. By Thursday, Glenridge's HOA board was in full panic mode. Elise texted me discreetly to say that 3 board members had resigned. Rowena, however, was doubling down, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, an administrative error. But I just received something she couldn't spin away. A subpoena. I was being called to testify in a formal hearing with the County Ethics Committee. So was Doyle, and so was Rowena. At the hearing, Rowena looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. Her blazer was wrinkled and her notes were a mess. Doyle didn't show up. His lawyer did, citing health issues. I presented my evidence methodically. The judge wasn't the same one from the small claims case, but the look on his face was identical, disbelief turning to disgust. Rowena tried to deflect, saying she'd relied on assurances from county staff. A commissioner cut her off. You submitted documents with forged signatures. You attempted to seize control of properties that were never legally part of your association. You issued fines without jurisdiction and filed a fraudulent amendment with the zoning office. Rowena opened her mouth, then closed it again. When the ruling came, it was swift. The Glenridge HOA charter was revoked effective immediately. All fines, liens, and actions taken under its authority were nullified. Rowena was referred to the district attorney for criminal investigation. Doyle was placed on administrative leave pending internal review. I stepped out of the building into the sunlight, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. A few neighbors were waiting outside. Elise was there, along with a couple I barely knew who lived 2 doors down. They clapped as I walked past. We're throwing a block party Friday, someone said. No HOA required. I nodded, smiled, and said, I'll bring the trailer. The Friday evening block party stretched across 3 front yards with fold-out tables full of grilled food and homemade sides. Kids zipped past in chalk-covered scooters, and someone had set up a cornhole board near my trailer, which now bore a hand-painted sign that read, Freedom Lot. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I was adjusting the speaker volume when a woman I hadn't met before approached with a plate balanced in one hand and a cautious expression. You're Kyle, right? I live over near the cul-de-sac, she said, offering a quick handshake. I'm Dana. I used to be on the Architectural Review Committee. Before all this, I nodded, setting down the remote. You must be glad it's over. Her shoulders dipped slightly. That's the thing, I don't think it is. I raised an eyebrow. She glanced around before continuing. Rowena had access to the HOA's escrow reserve, about $35,000. It was supposed to be untouched unless there was a community emergency. But the last time I checked the books right before I resigned, nearly $27,000 was transferred out. When? 6 weeks ago. She categorized it as legal contingency planning, but that was before she even filed the claim against you. I frowned. You think she pocketed it? She didn't write herself a check, if that's what you mean. She transferred it to a shell vendor called Ridgeway Management Solutions. I looked it up. No real website. The address leads to a UPS drop box. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I asked, Did you keep a copy of the ledger? Dana reached into her tote and pulled out a flash drive. I figured someone should have it. The original files were taken off the HOA's Google Drive 2 days ago. I slipped it into my back pocket. You just made my weekend more interesting. Late that night, after the last cooler was emptied and the kids had been herded home, I booted up my laptop. The folder Dana gave me wasn't just a transaction log. It had internal emails, meeting notes, and draft correspondence, some of which had never been sent. One draft email, dated over a month before my first violation notice, was addressed to a private attorney. It outlined a plan to expand Glenridge jurisdiction to absorb unregulated lots and preemptively prepare lien protocols for non-compliant properties. But the part that made my stomach turn came near the end, where she wrote, "If we can't gain consent, we'll establish implied community interest via deed reference confusion." Easier to enforce after the fact. She knew exactly what she was doing. I took screenshots, labeled everything, and sent it to Commissioner Varga's office with a brief note. I didn't expect a reply that late, but she called the next morning. "I forwarded this to the DA," she said without preamble. "You're going to want to stay nearby. There may be a formal deposition request. Is there enough here to move forward?" "There's enough here to charge her with misappropriation of funds and attempting to defraud homeowners. But it gets worse." She paused. Rowena submitted a reimbursement claim to the county for legal expenses related to the annexation process, nearly $9,000. She listed it under neighborhood infrastructure improvement. She tried to bill the county, which means she committed fraud against a public agency. That bumps this out of small-time HOA politics and into felony territory. I let out a low whistle, and Doyle, already under investigation, but this makes his position worse. If he knowingly approved an annexation based on fraudulent documents and received any kind of benefit, he's looking at conspiracy charges. I hung up and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. What had started as a petty turf war over a fishing trailer was now unraveling into a full criminal case. On Monday, I was contacted by a county investigator named Letitia Cruz. She wore a suit that looked like it had seen more courtrooms than lunch breaks, and her voice was clipped with authority. "We need your original footage and the full copy of that flash drive," she said, flipping open her notepad. "And I'd like to walk the property lines with you." Just to confirm, the annexation attempt covered areas outside their legal reach. We spent 40 minutes marking boundaries, reviewing the plat map, and cross-referencing the HOA filing. Letitia took photos, double-checked measurements, and asked precise questions. "Did anyone from the HOA ever physically deliver a notice to your door before the fine letters?" "Nope, everything came through the mail. That matters," she said. "If they claim you were aware of your inclusion but there's no record of direct contact, it weakens any implied consent argument." I handed her 3 unopened letters I'd kept, all with the same postmark, all unsigned. Letitia collected everything, thanked me, and left with the professionalism of someone who already knew what the grand jury was going to decide. By Thursday, the news broke. A local outlet published a short article. "Former HOA president under investigation for fraud, misuse of public funds." They didn't name her directly, but everyone in Glenridge knew exactly who it was. A few neighbors dropped by that evening. Not to gossip that part had passed, but to ask what would happen next. One couple, Ron and Maureen, had lived in the neighborhood for 19 years. They confessed that they'd always suspected the HOA was mismanaged, but had never imagined it would go this far. "Do you think we'll get any of that money back?" Maureen asked, holding a mug of tea like it was a lifeline. "If the DA presses charges and wins restitution, maybe, but don't count on it," I said. "It's probably gone somewhere slick and hard to trace." "What about Doyle? He's not getting his pension without a fight, that's for sure." That weekend, I was asked to attend a special community meeting in the park gazebo. Not organized by any board, just neighbors wanting to reclaim some sense of direction. Someone brought a whiteboard. Another passed around a clipboard for contacts. They asked if I'd consider helping draft a new charter, not an HOA, but a voluntary neighborhood council that could advocate for city services and host events. No fines, no enforcement, no bureaucracy. I agreed to help draft it under one condition: no titles, no president. No one gets more power than anyone else. They all agreed. On Monday, I was subpoenaed again, this time for a grand jury hearing related to Rowena's financial actions and Doyle's role in the annexation scheme. I sat in the courthouse for nearly 6 hours, answering questions under oath. When I emerged, Letitia was waiting outside. She handed me a sealed envelope. "Formal charges were filed this morning," she said. "Fraud, falsification of public records, and criminal misappropriation. She's being brought in for arraignment tomorrow. Bail, probably. But she won't be sitting on any board again. That part's over." I opened the envelope when I got home. Inside was a formal declaration from the county registrar stating that the Glenridge HOA was not only dissolved, but permanently barred from reorganizing under the same name due to systemic abuse of authority and procedural violations. I pinned it to my corkboard. Later that night, I walked out to the curb. The street was quiet. Porch lights flickered on slowly like stars in a settling sky. The trailer sat where it always had, undisturbed and now, unquestionably, untouchable. From down the block, someone called out, "Hey Kyle, we're making signs for the new council. You want one?" "Sure," I said, "but make it simple." "What do you want it to say?" I thought about it for a second. No kings, no fines, just neighbors. That got a cheer from across the street. And for the first time since I'd moved in, it actually felt like home. 2 weeks after the grand jury hearing, I got a call just after sunrise. It was Letitia Cruz, the county investigator who'd walked the property lines with me. Her voice was sharper than usual. "We executed a search warrant this morning," she said. "Rowena's residence and a storage unit she rented under a different name. We found documents we didn't expect, some that tie her to forged bank statements and backdated contracts." I sat up on the edge of the bed, rubbing my face. "How deep does it go?" "Deeper than we thought. There are records of payments made to a private investigator, someone she hired to dig into residents who opposed her, including you." That yanked me fully awake. "She paid someone to follow me, not just follow. He pulled your property history, employment records, even tried to access your voter registration through a third-party vendor. She kept notes on you, typed, printed, filed by date. There's a section labeled exerting leverage." My stomach turned. Letitia continued. "There's also a ledger of HOA dues collected from residents who weren't technically part of the association, people like Dana, Elise, and 24 others. Some of them were intimidated into paying. Rowena listed them as soft targets." I looked out the window. The neighborhood looked the same on the surface, but it was like staring at a pond after realizing how many snakes lived under it. "She's being arraigned again this afternoon," Letitia said. "This time, there's no bail." Later that day, I drove down to the courthouse not to testify, but just to be present. A few others from the neighborhood came too. Elise was there, standing with her arms crossed, flanked by 2 older residents I hadn't met before. Word was spreading fast. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Rowena entered in a plain gray jumpsuit, her wrists cuffed. She looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in presence. The judge read off the new charges: wire fraud, identity misuse, falsification of public documents, and criminal harassment. Her attorney tried to argue diminished responsibility due to stress and community pressure, but the judge cut him off. "There is no justification for systematic deception, financial exploitation, and covert surveillance of private individuals," he said. "This court is ordering a full audit of all HOA financial activities for the past 5 years." Rowena didn't look up once. As we left the courtroom, Elise turned to me. "She had files on us. What else do you think she was planning?" I shook my head. "Doesn't matter anymore. She's not going to get the chance." Back in Glenridge, the effects of the fallout were finally surfacing. A local title agency had begun reaching out to affected homeowners, offering to help them clear any residual liens placed by the now defunct HOA. The county had issued a blanket nullification order for all unauthorized fines and amendments Rowena had filed during her tenure. Ron and Maureen, the couple I'd spoken with at the park meeting, had offered their garage as a temporary document center. Volunteers came by with boxes of old notices, fines, and letters they'd kept over the years. The goal was to build a complete history of what the HOA had done, what it had taken, who it had threatened, and how far the manipulation had spread. One of the biggest surprises came from a man named Ben, a retired postal worker who'd lived 3 houses down from Rowena for over a decade. He brought in a stack of envelopes that had been returned to the HOA's address, but never remailed dozens of them. Many were certified mail notices that Rowena had logged as delivered. "She asked me once if I could misplace something for her," Ben said. "I didn't think much of it at the time, but I guess I should have." The evidence was overwhelming. By the end of the month, the district attorney's office filed a civil suit alongside the criminal case, seeking restitution for misused funds and damages to the community. A judge ordered Rowena's personal assets frozen, her bank accounts, her second vehicle, and even her investment property in a neighboring town. Doyle, the zoning supervisor who'd signed off on the fraudulent annexation, resigned quietly and was later indicted on 2 counts of official misconduct. His plea agreement included a permanent ban from holding any public office or government job. While the legal machinery churned, the neighborhood took on a new rhythm. Without the HOA breathing down everyone's necks, small changes began to appear: porch furniture that didn't match the design standards, garden flags that had once been forbidden, and a few colorful mailboxes that probably would have triggered a formal letter last year. People started waving more, walking slower, talking longer over fences. The community council we drafted took root, aided by volunteers like Dana and Elise. They organized a town hall-style meeting at the local library to discuss everything from drainage issues to hosting a summer movie night. No one had authority. No one wanted it. That was the point. One afternoon, I got a knock on the door. A man in a navy polo introduced himself as a federal investigator from the Office of Inspector General. He'd been assigned to review any federal implications from Rowena's actions, particularly regarding the use of postal services and identity records. "She used a federal database to verify someone's employment," he said. "That's a felony. We're coordinating with state prosecutors to consolidate charges." I offered him everything I had left: copies of documents, timestamps from the security system, even the logbook Dana had compiled from the HOA's shared drive before they took it offline. He thanked me and promised to follow up. By the time summer rolled around, the courthouse had scheduled Rowena's criminal trial for late August. The list of witnesses was long: over 30 residents, 2 county officials, and 3 forensic accountants. The prosecution intended to prove not just fraud, but a pattern of calculated abuse veiled under the authority of a homeowners association. I wasn't called to testify again. My job was done. But the DA's office kept me updated. The trial lasted 4 days. On the 5th, the verdict came down. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for the following month. She was given 6 years in state prison, restitution of $32,000 to be distributed among affected residents, and a 10-year ban on serving in any organizational leadership, civic, private, or otherwise. The courtroom was quiet when she was let out. No one cheered. No one had to. Justice didn't need applause. Back in Glenridge, the trailer still sat in my driveway. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder of how far someone would go to control what wasn't theirs. Of how important it is to know your rights, and of how a neighborhood, when pushed, can push back harder. Elise stopped by one evening with a clipboard full of signatures. "We're putting together a petition to convert the old HOA building into a community space," she said. "Maybe a reading room. Or just somewhere to sit and talk." I signed without asking questions. As she walked away, I looked down the street. Lawn chairs on porches, chalk drawings on sidewalks, a wind chime clinking lazily in the breeze. No more letters, no more threats, no more clipboards in the driveway. Just neighbors, just peace.